Hello and welcome to the Stormont Sources podcast, where we take you inside politics at Stormont and inside policymaking for Northern Ireland. I'm David McCann, also on the podcast. I have my two regulars. We have Tim Cairns, who was a former special advisor to First Minister Peter Robinson. Hello, Tim.
Hello, David. Hello, Naomi. Hello, Michael.
And we also have Michael McKernan. He was a former special advisor to the SDLP from 2007 to 2016. Hello, Michael.
Hello, David. Hello, Tim. Hello, Naomi.
And welcome to our first ever live recording. So this is a big first for us. We're at the Alliance Party Conference for a conversation with the party leader and Minister for Justice, Naomi Long. We'll welcome her to the podcast in just a moment. But Tim, Michael, you're two outsiders coming in to this conference. Sadly, I've been at every Alliance conference since 2014. That's pretty sad for me, I suppose.
Nothing compared to me.
So, just ask first, Michael, how's the conference felt to you so far? You'll be doing one more conference, Naomi, before the Assembly election.
Yeah, next year.
So how have you found it?
Yeah, I find it lively. I think there's plenty of energy in this party. It's a bit bigger than the SDLP conference I was at recently. So the party's going well. I think you're living with a lot of hope and not fear. but I think things are going well for the Alliance. But I suppose when you're on the up, the big challenge is to keep going up, and that's not easy. And you have very capable ministers in government, but they're being restricted from doing the things they would like to do in some cases. Okay. Impression of the conference: full of energy, full of exhibitors, full of media. Alliance is going okay.
Well, it's going okay. Not that bad. Hannah's going to tell you off for saying that now. So. Okay, Tim, you have organised quite a number of party conferences for the Democratic Unionist Party. So how have you found this one?
This is my second Alliance Party conference. Sorry, just handing water down. This is my second Alliance Party conference. I was here 2 years ago. The thing about it is, I absolutely and utterly detest party conferences. All party conferences, doesn't matter what the party is. And you see, if you're a member of staff, and Sharon's running about, I was talking to her a few minutes ago. I mean, when you're the member of staff at a party conference, it is the worst 2 days of your life. Because if anything goes wrong, you're to blame. And if anything goes right, you get absolutely no credit at all. So you see Sharon over there, you all need to be hugging her afterwards, because this has been the most stressful 2 days. I have been in that position. There was a wonderful bit. We went outside to get our picture taken with Naomi, and she comes back in and she goes, "This panel's overrunning now." And it is awful when that happens. People speak too long. Panels overrun. I applaud anybody who's a party member who comes to a party conference, because, they're great. They're great. Please keep coming, because parties need the support and the money. So they do. And a conference is a great way to connect, great way to see people you don't always get to see. But also, I think for MLAs, it's tough, because I see you guys, you never get to take a breath and a moment to talk to anybody, because you've got to go around exhibitor stand. Everybody's trying to give you a booklet, get their picture taken. So for MLAs, staff, not a great day, but I'm sure you guys have had a brilliant day.
And can I just say, I will never make another Alistair MacDonald joke again. Those lights are incredible. How do you give a speech?
Can somebody turn those lights
down? I
will
never, ever make a joke about him ever again.
Michael was in the room that day when Alistair MacDonald got blinded by the lights.
Behind the light.
You were controlling the light.
Yeah, it's terrible. Right, okay, just before we go on, just remember, give us some subscriptions as well. So if you do listen to Stormont Sources, click subscribe. Let us know. Also, get in touch with us, hello@stormontsources.com. Now, we're delighted to have with us the party leader and Minister of Justice, Naomi Long. So give her a big round of applause, everybody. Now, I didn't realise this until you mentioned it in your speech. You're 20 years in the leadership team of this political party.
That's right. Yeah.
20 years.
So in 2006, I took over from Eileen when Eileen retired as deputy leader. And then in 2016, David retired as leader, and I took over there. So yeah, sometimes it feels like no time at all, and then there are days when it feels like much longer than 20 years, I have to say. But yeah, 25 in total in elected politics, and somewhere around 30 in politics generally.
So I suppose you're 10 years as leader this year. You are the longest serving out of all the current crop of leaders that we have, of the five main parties, I mean. Well, I suppose, is there going to be, how many more years, Naomi, is there probably going to be from you? If you want to just tell us, we won't.
Well, I suppose,
We won't share it. Rolling Kate's eyes just perked up there.
Just keep it amongst ourselves. No, look, at the end of the day, if you look at the history of Alliance, we've always been quite stable in terms of leaders. I think since the beginning, in total, we've had 8 leaders, and that's it. Some parties have burnt through that in the last 5 years. So from my point of view, I think it just shows that the party is quite united, quite stable, and able to still get on with the job. I mean, at some point, either I will feel that I have nothing left to give, or the party will feel that there is somebody out there that can take it to the next level. And I think that will happen, hopefully, as everything else in the party does, by mutual agreement. Unlike other parties, I vacate my leadership every year. So I have to be re-elected as party leader annually. There's nothing to stop anybody in the party throwing their hat in the ring. In June of this year, just so you all know, you are free. You are free to throw.
There's a few people on the floor why
you are free to throw your hat in the ring. The one thing I would say is I'm not in a position, and I'm fortunate that I'm hanging on because there is no one else.
Yeah.
And I think there are sometimes you see that where it's a difficult decision for party leader to step down because they're looking around going, we've no succession plan, who next, what will happen? I'm not in that position. If I were, God forbid, to fall under a bus tomorrow, I know that there would be people here who would, I was going to say pick up the pieces and carry on, not of me, of the party. But yeah, I don't have that worry. And for as long as I have the energy and the enthusiasm and the drive to keep doing it, and the party want me to, then I think we're in a good place.
So obviously 20 years in the leadership team, you obviously seem to enjoy leading the party in one shape or another. As deputy leader, you were quite an influential deputy leader, and then as leader. So, have you ever lost, 20 years would wear anyone down. Do you still have the same passion for it, do you think, that you had this time 10 years ago?
Well, if we kind of rewind, deputy leader is a kind of strange job in that you're really just deputising for the leader occasionally, but you have to make it into whatever it is you want it to be. You don't have like a formal role as such. And I suppose my thing was to get out and do the stuff that maybe David wasn't able to do. He was doing a lot of work in the department, or he was very tied up with kind of talks and other things. So, for example, when the Haas talks happened, I went with Chris Little at the time, and we kind of led up the team there and other things. I also, when I went to Westminster, I had a kind of role there. So I didn't have the same problem carving out a space for myself. In terms of leadership, I actually, if I'm really honest, I didn't really think I was going to be leader, and I wasn't really intending to be leader. That wasn't the plan. Because I suppose from my point of view, I would have liked David Ford to have just stayed on indefinitely, because I really liked working with him. He was doing a really good job, and I was quite happy for him to keep going. And in 2015, obviously, when I lost my Westminster seat, I took a bit of time out to kind of decide what I was going to do. And I thought maybe, after everything that had happened, the flags protests and all of the rest of it, that maybe my passion had gone. And I found during that year out that it really hadn't. I found myself arguing with the radio and shouting at the television and all that kind of stuff. And I realised, no, I'm still quite motivated and passionate, and that's why I got back involved. And then kind of the rest kind of happened after that. And even now, like, there are days, of course, where you're like, are we really having this same argument again? That's the one thing about being around a long time in politics. You realise how cyclical these arguments are, and it feels like a hamster wheel, and you can kind of almost predict what the next one will be. And there are times when you kind of despair and think, are we really having this conversation again? But at the same time, every time you have the conversation, you hope you're nudging it a little bit further, you're moving it a bit forward, and you get the opportunity to do that. And I still think that leading Alliance is actually quite an easy job, because although we are, as you know, quite an argumentative bunch, even amongst ourselves, we actually do have common purpose. It's not just something that we say. We actually do get on quite well. Many of the people in the Assembly team either work with me in my office or, have been friends with me for years, or people that I've worked with in the party for years. And there is a sense of camaraderie and friendship there that underpins it, and that makes leadership easy. It would be harder if I was trying to coalesce a really fractious bunch of people who didn't like each other, didn't really like me, and didn't really know why we were doing it other than personal ambition. I wouldn't want to lead a party like that, but Alliance is different.
So let's talk about, obviously, Alliance are the third largest party in the executive, and wouldn't have thought we would have been saying that 15 years ago. But Michael is, for anyone who listens to Stormont Sources, you'll know that Michael has two topics that he loves. One is integrated education, and the other one is Lough Neagh. He was Mr. Integrated Education in the SDLP. But Michael, I'll throw it over to you on Lough Neagh, because I know that's something that you're incredibly passionate about.
Yeah, Lough Neagh. First, I should say it's great to be here among other people who don't have any particular interest in rugby union football. But Lough Neagh, look, it was great at the conference that you had the panel there on Lough Neagh, and it shows to people like David that Lough Neagh is not some local issue that people like me and Lurgan go on about because we see the green algae in our neighbourhood. It's a national issue. Most of our drinking water is coming from there, and Alliance are right to recognise that. And it's not just because you have the Minister there, but I feel the Minister's frustration because the DUP and Sinn Féin have blocked him from taking really meaningful action, particularly on what is going into Lough Neagh, and it's still going in every year. I was at a football match the other day and I just watched all the tractors and spreaders just going up and down the road all day long, and that's happening all over Northern Ireland after this wet spell. So I'm just wondering, and Naomi, you said in your speech that you weren't going to stick around forever not being allowed to do some of the things you want to do. Do you think there's a way through there on Lough Neagh that you can actually put a stop to some of this dirt that is going into all our waterways?
Well, I mean, there has to be. That's the first thing. I mean, you're right, Lough Neagh is not a local problem. It's a national scandal, frankly. And it's not the only inland waterway that's affected in this way. So we have seen similar issues in other places. It's also really important because it is important for our environment, but it's also really important for people's livelihoods and for our tourist industry and all of those things. And all of that is being destroyed because of the eutrophication of the loch. So that's a real problem. I don't know if you want to get me started on this, because my background before I was in politics was as a civil engineer and specifically dealing with wastewater and water treatment. And so I probably know more about the inside of sewers than most other people sitting around the executive table. Good practice for politics, but nobody wants to listen to my conversations at the executive about it because I get quite impassioned about this stuff. We have got to look at what we're putting in. We have to recognise what is possible and what isn't. So there are, I think, lots of really exciting things that are happening at the moment. Lots of developers, for example, who are able to use sustainable urban drainage systems, take all the rainwater away. It tends to be the lesser pollutant. But it's quite hard to do that in old premises. We have to go essentially house to house to remove that. So that's quite hard to achieve. There are other things that we have. There are combined sewer overflows, and you've got a lot of runoff from that, and that's a contributor. Where I think we really struggle is that those who, if you want, are concerned, and we're all concerned about farming and about wanting the farming community to thrive, but we've got to do that in cooperation and in coexistence with nature. It can't be done in conflict, because otherwise we simply will not be able to have a sustainable farming future and the kind of food and production that we have. So we've got to clean up, I think, our sewage treatment works. I think we've got to invest in our infrastructure. I think it's more than just about money. I think Northern Ireland Water needs a complete restructure, because I think the way it's structured at the minute, government will never be able to afford to pay the capital investment that it needs. So it needs to be structured in a way that it can actually draw in investment from outside. And I think we need to look at that really carefully as to how we do that. I think we also then need to look at what is going into it. So, I mean, the Nutrients Action Plan that Andrew has been trying to get through the executive, it's like pulling teeth. But the bottom line is that what is being poured into Lough Neagh is turning it into this nutrient-rich soup, which is then just completely eutrophying the whole place. There's no oxygen getting through, so the plant life and everything else is dying below that scummy surface. What you see on the surface is just one layer of what's going on in Lough Neagh. Beneath it, the plants are dying. All of the other biodiversity that you have in a loch like that make it worthwhile is all being deprived of oxygen and sunlight, and it's dying. I mean, the loch is dying. It's not going to happen overnight. There are strategic decisions, I think, that have been made in the past that were wrong. Things like dredging the sand off the base. That actually stirred up decades, if not centuries, of pollutants that were caught up in the sand in the base. By dredging that actually kind of brought all that to the surface and made the problem worse. So we're going to have to clean up how we deal with water and sewage. We're going to have to work with farmers about how we manage nutrients, and lots of farmers are already engaged in that process. We're going to have to invest in some of the new technology that Andrew Andrew's been looking at to try and improve things. We're going to have to be realistic. It's going to have to be science-led. We can't do this on the fields. It just won't work that way. And having sympathy with somebody who wants to spread slurry isn't a good enough reason to let it continue.
Okay. Another portfolio, of course, your own portfolio, the Ministry of Justice. Tim, I know these are issues that you focus very heavily on. So
I was struck in your speech about all of the things that have yet to be done. You know, court delays, we need to tackle them. You know, we need to do stuff in and around maybe digital justice. What have the challenges been since you've taken over justice since 2020, and how do you see those challenges really working out? What do you think is going to be the legislative or regulatory change that's going to make the justice system here better and more friendly towards those who interact with it?
I think the two biggest challenges that I have faced since 2020 is 2.5 years of nothing. Because I think there was real damage done because of the suspension of the institutions. If you look back to 2020, in that 2.5-year period I passed 5 major pieces of legislation, and I had another 5 pieces of legislation ready to go. And because of that 2.5-year hiatus that we had because of the suspension of the institutions, we're now down to 3 in this 2-year period. So that's the first big challenge, this stop-go government. People think it doesn't matter, and I understand that because they'll say, well, we're not feeling the benefit of Stormont being back, but it doesn't work like that. What you will feel the benefit of is consistent governance all the time, that it's not breaking, it's not stopping, it's continually pursuing an agenda, and that's what delivers, because legislation takes time. Policy is quicker, but legislation takes time. Second thing I think that has really hampered us in terms of some of the things that I would love to be able to do is funding. And the Department of Justice, and everybody has recognised it, has been underfunded now really since 2015. So when devolution happened in 2011, there was a settlement from the UK government that transferred across. I don't think that settlement actually was adequate. So it didn't account for example, the cost of legacy, which we have had to absorb over all that time. But irrespective of that, it was ring-fenced and protected. In 2015, that ring-fencing was removed. And immediately other parties, other ministries started to raid our budget. And what we've gone from is a situation where we had 11% of the block grant down to now just around 8% of the block grant. If you compare that, if you add education and health together, it's 71%. But I'm providing courts, prisons, policing, probation, everything else that that has anything to do with justice comes out of 8% of the budget. It's just not viable, and we have managed always to live within our budget. I am by nature fiscally prudent. I think that's how Michael describes me, or tight. But anyway, I am by nature fiscally prudent, and I do worry about this idea that you can just overspend your budget and that your budgets don't matter. But I know this year that I would not be able to live within the allocation in the block grant, because for 10 years we have been trimming away and salami slicing everything. By the end of the 3-year cycle, just to put it in context, by the end of the 3-year cycle, for me to live within my budget, the deficit on my budget that we're predicting based on the draft budget would require me to close Youth Justice Agency, Prison Service, Northern Ireland Court Service, and I think Probation Board. So their full budget is what my deficit is in year 3 of this monitoring round. So I have to be realistic that when I go into the department, I have fewer staff than I've ever had. We have fewer people able to do the work. It slows things down. It creates tensions. That's one side of it. Then the other side of it is what happens when you go through the doors of the executive, and you're familiar with this. But probably, if we're honest, it was less of an issue at the time when you were a special advisor than it has become. This idea of taking policy documents, legislation hostage, not giving feedback. If you put a paper down and somebody doesn't like something that's in it and they want you to take something out, if they just come and tell me, I can go and say, okay, can we talk about it? Can I convince you?
But why is that not happening? Because I remember back when me and Michael were there, and if I had an issue with Michael or with David Ford at the time, you go and talk to their SPAD, you'd get it on the day of the executive, you'd be milling about talking. Why is that not happening now?
It does between some departments, and then there are others where they're harder to reach. Sometimes the special advisors will have that conversation and will say, I'm not really sure what the problem is, but the minister is really stuck on this. And it can be really hard to get stuff through. Some of it is about tit-for-tat stuff. It's about holding something hostage to because they're doing that to each other or whatever, and we sometimes get caught up in that. Other times it's just about, Andrew will find stuff that he wants to do being held up because people are just questioning the basic science, the numbers. That's madness. If you're going to say, look, we see your numbers, we see the facts, our view is we're not going to take that decision. It's a different conversation, but actually saying, I don't believe the facts, you can't deal with that. How do you engage with people who just want to be counterfactual? And I would find it frustrating at times. There are some things, in the last mandate to get my 5th bill through, which was supposed to be a miscellaneous provisions bill, and ended up being a serious sexual offences and human trafficking bill. In order to do that, I had to remove about 30% of the content, which became the current Justice Bill, which is with the committee, plus quite a few other things that we've added. But Edwin Poots came to me from the DUP and said, we're not going to sign off on those other things. It needs to be narrowed in scope. We're going into an election and we don't want it to become like a Christmas tree bill, so we need to narrow the scope. And I said, okay, not happy with that. But rather than have it sit there and get nothing, I would rather get 70% over the line than throw 100% of it down the drain. And that's what we did. I think the last mandate was tough in terms of that negotiation. I think this mandate, in some ways, has been worse.
But do you think the bigger parties are ganging up an alliance, or is this happening across the piece? Is this personal to your two ministries?
We actually had this chat in the podcast before, and Tim pretty much owned up in his time in the executive that the DUP and Sinn Féin did almost exclude the other parties.
Absolutely. There's the SDLP and the Ulster Unionist Party at the time. Not actually so much David Ford, but the SDLP and the Ulster Unionist Party, we definitely squeezed their budgets, and that was a deliberate choice to do so. Do you think that's happening now?
I think there's less of that. So over the last couple of years, I've seen the justice budget actually slightly improve. If it had continued on the trajectory it was going, it would have been catastrophic. It's actually improved a little bit because I think the argument has been made and won publicly, and I think that constrains people somewhat. It doesn't match what people say publicly about wanting to invest in policing and justice. It doesn't even come close. People want me to do everything with nothing, and I'm not a magician, I'm a politician, and ultimately I can only do as much as I have funding for. So there's a little bit of that. There's also, I guess, they have their mutual vetoes. So they can kind of take each other's stuff hostage, but eventually, in order to get something through, they can give something back. We don't have that. So we kind of have to make the case positively for what it is we're trying to do. And sometimes that takes a long time. Sometimes I think the exchanges could happen a lot faster, a lot quicker. And the DUP in particular are slow in the executive to pick up on things, to come back to you on things. You have to chase a lot. And it's not a reflection, actually, of the special advisors. I think it's at ministerial level. There's a bit of inertia in response.
Fear in the DUP?
I don't know. I sometimes... I'm not a conspiracy theorist by nature, so my instinct is to assume it's more cock-up than conspiracy. But sometimes it does look a bit like people are dragging their heels because they'd quite like a government where Sinn Féin or the First Minister not to work as well as when the DUP were the First Minister. And that, to me, I don't know if that's the agenda or if that's just me being cynical after being around the executive table for so long. I don't know, but I remember when we came back in 2020, the focus on we've got to deliver, we've got to show people that the institutions work, we've got to show them why it's important to have devolved institutions. I haven't felt that same urgency around delivery in this mandate, which makes me think something has changed, and the only tangible thing that has changed is who's deputy and who's First Minister, which is sort of laughable because it's a kind of pointless differential between them.
Yeah, it was quite a testy debate this week, though, about that in the chamber at the minute.
And Sinn Féin made fools of themselves, in my view, because having called themselves joint First Ministers the entire time that they were the deputy, they then flip-flopped on it as soon as they become First Minister, and it's somebody else that's a deputy. And it's like, you told us it would be better for Northern Ireland to say you were joint First Ministers because that's what it is and that is the role. But now that you're the First Minister, it really matters to you to be first. And there's something disingenuous about that. I mean, to put it in context, during some of the talks, we were actually offered our own veto. So government came to us when we were complaining and saying we need to get rid of these vetoes from unionism and nationalism. It's blocking progress. It shouldn't be allowed. They said, well, what about if we gave you a veto? And I said, no, the last thing we need is another party that can slow things down. I said, what I want is the vetoes removed, not because it's not just about wanting to be treated equally, it's about wanting to get stuff done. So another veto for us wouldn't have got stuff done. It would have allowed us to stop things we didn't like. But that's not democracy. So we didn't want that, and I think we need to be more consistent. It's not the biggest issue, by the way, the First and Deputy First Minister, Joint First Ministers, call them what you will. It's not the biggest issue that we have in Stormont in terms of reform, but it just shows the degree to which self-interest drives the conversation, and that's why I think governments need to be involved in leading it and guiding it.
Now, just to take a step back, you were saying in your speech that our continued participation in the executive cannot and should not be taken for granted. Now, nerds like me are obsessed with the idea of opposition. More importantly, will Alliance ever go into it? So,
Well, we did in 2016. So we didn't go into government in 2016 through choice. We were in opposition before. I'm looking at David because that's when we went into the Assembly.
But you guys seem and I get it, you've got a different electoral coalition than many other parties who want to make the place work and want to be seen to make the place work. So what are the conditions there that would make you, I'm guessing you're talking about from May of next year, right?
Well, no, I'm talking about, this is an ongoing assessment that we make. So in 2016, we didn't go into the executive. Because we had called for an end to the abuse of the petition of concern mechanism, and David will recall a testing meeting that we had that didn't last more than, I think Stephen just about had enough time to take his coat off before Arlene banged the table and raised her voice, and we went, right, we're done here, and he put it back on again, like, oh, okay, and let's go.
I think that's happened to Tim a few times.
Yeah. Well, I know to be fair, I got on quite well with Arlene, but she did deny that it happened, and everybody I know from the DUP who knows her believes it did. But anyway...
I mean, I wasn't there, but I'm pretty sure you're right.
So we didn't go into government on that occasion, and Claire Sugden became the Justice Minister, and it collapsed within 7-8 months. We decided in 2020, given that it was meant to be a kind of a new start for us, and given that things were still quite fragile, we kind of felt that there was a duty on us to try and go in, I guess, to try and oil the wheels of government, to try and work with people to make things happen. And I don't regret that decision at all, because if you look at the outcomes with COVID and other things, there were times when, contrary to my natural instincts, I was Kofi Annan in the executive, where I was trying to calm people down and actually get people to work together and tic-tac in between different parties to say, you know, don't shoot this paper down because actually I drafted
Who were the worst offenders in that case, though? Because they're always, because any time you talk to DUP or Sinn Féin, a DUP special advisor will tell you it's all the Shinners, and the Shinner advisor will tell you, no, it's all the DUP. So
I think Sinn Féin did a lot of missteps very early on. I think the stuff around school closures, when we'd literally had an executive meeting where we'd agreed not to do the school closures thing. And whilst I understand the motivation, the cross-border element of it, I don't think that was wise, because it undermined immediately the Education Minister in any coherence. And it looked like we were reacting to things rather than planning a route for COVID. I think the Bobby Story funeral massively soured relationships. And to be fair, at a human level, Edwin Poots lost his father during COVID, and there were only 6 people able to go to the funeral, and his father had been a former mayor and so on, so a very well-known person who would have drawn a big crowd to his funeral. And you could tell when it was being discussed, even in the executive, Edwin was quite emotional about it, and I think rightly so, because he felt that he hadn't been able to offer his father the send-off that he deserved. And yet here you had Bobby Story and the road lined with people, and people who had literally been saying to others, stay at home, save lives, not doing what they'd said. And I'm sorry, but in politics, if you don't practice what you preach, you've got no credibility whatsoever. Yeah. So that soured the relationships. I've mentioned Arlene already, but she is quite...
hard to get on with?
No, I don't know. I wasn't going to say...
I'll just fill that silence for you.
No, she can be quite easy to wind
Prickly?
up.
Oh, that's
Prickly, yeah. So she's quite easily wound up. So when people would do things or say things, I think she would lose her temper very quickly.
Arlene lose her temper? No.
And things would escalate.
No.
But I have some sympathy, because that's my natural instinct too. And the problem is, even sometimes we were trying to help Arlene, she took offence at what you were doing, so it was kind of hard to navigate. The DUP didn't help. Like Edwin's sectarianising of COVID and the fact it was all nationalist areas where it was spreading and everything, just completely ignored context. And yet he fell silent when it was like Rangers supporters out celebrating on the Shankle Road. There was just this context constant nonsense. And it did feel a little bit to me, it felt chaotic. And myself and Nicola Mallon were there trying to hold a kind of line of saying, look, we need to be consistent, we need to be clear, we need to make timely decisions. Better a decision you don't like now than having everybody sitting outside, as happened at one of the executive meetings that went on for 4 days, not knowing what's going to happen. By the time we made the decision, it was too late to reopen hospitality anyway. So that kind of ineptitude, to me, degraded the relationships. Yeah. It was difficult,
but
it was
is it like that now? Because you don't have that crisis atmosphere anymore. So what's it like? What's an executive meeting without breaching too many confidences? Well, you can breach as much as you want, but what's it like now around the table?
It's better than it was. So, you know, in the last mandate, we would have received our agenda sometimes 40 minutes after the meeting was due to start. That was typical. I would have to complain because I would be getting texts from journalists going, I believe you're deciding this today. And I'm like, I didn't even know it was on the agenda. I haven't even seen the papers. Sinn Féin and the DUP went off in a huddle and kind of lobbed stuff at us. And then we were going, this is incoherent. The idea that I could go into a supermarket, I'll give you an example. I could go to a restaurant with 6 people from 2 different households, but technically couldn't have Michael's mum round for lunch to my own house. 3 people from 2 households. How is that more dangerous? And that's the bit that I couldn't get. There was no... If people are going to do something when you ask them, they have to be able to work it through in their head that it makes sense. And that wasn't happening. And I got frustrated with that. So I would say most times now we'll get the agenda at least the day before or the night before or in the morning before executive starts, which is an improvement. It's not what we're meant to get, but it's better. The other thing I would say is that I think the bigger problem is getting stuff onto the agenda at the minute. Although what has happened in the last few weeks, which I actually think is better, is some things have been put on for discussion as opposed to agreement. And that's given us the chance to find out, which we should be able to do behind the scenes, but it's actually given us a chance to find out what are the issues, how are we going to deal with them, and can we come to agreement. And some of those have actually then been taken for decision afterwards, and it sped things up. It's not as bad as it was the last time. It's quite civil. I mean, we're all from very different parts.
You're re-traumatising me there.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, does that sound familiar? As a smaller party, Michael, does that sound familiar to you?
It sounds very familiar. The papers, you get them even after the meeting has started. I'll almost say in my time, mainly with Margaret Ritchie, Alex Atwood, David Ford, Stephen Farry were good colleagues. David Ford, on one occasion, and remember, young people won't remember this, but Margaret had got herself into a standoff with the UDA over funding, and it was a really high-pressure time. And David Ford came into the ministerial office, and we were feeling the pressure, and he plunked himself down on the armchair, and he just said, I am right with you. Ask me to do anything, and I will do it. And at that moment, it was so helpful. It was so, just to get that moral support. And then I found Stephen Farry, I don't know, he had the patience of a saint. They abused him like they abused us. But it didn't seem to bug him as much. And I remember he was working on a proposal and he consulted everybody and he did his best to keep everybody happy. And it was over at Teacher Training College.
Oh, St Mary's, yeah.
And going for a single, unified teacher training college, which they
thankfully we stopped that.
Which they should still do.
Big mistake.
No, which they should still do, but he got nowhere with it.
But this begs the question: if all this has happened, all that thing with Stephen Farr, things you're going, why bother? Why go in?
There's a couple of things. So, what I said today and what I've said from the beginning is every time when we're going into the executive, it's because I think with the 2022 elections, 17 MLAs, an MP at Westminster and all of that, people expected us to be in government. And I think they would have been surprised if we had decided that with 17 MLAs we were going to sit on the benches and criticise and critique others' activities when we had the potential. And how much credibility really do you have if you're saying, well, I could be doing it, but I'd rather sit here and criticise you doing it? And I do think that's a real challenge if you have the numbers to be in government. I think from our perspective, we felt that after the breakdown in relationships, the opportunity that we had to change things was important. But the balance is always, will we be able to deliver enough Because no party, in fairness, is going to get everything they want in any mandate. There's always going to be compromise. It's an awkward kind of an arrangement that we have, and you're never going to get everything you want, but are you getting enough? So last mandate, I can look back and say, despite COVID, despite everything, I felt we made real progress in justice. In this mandate, I can see it's been a bit slow burn in terms of getting, my first bill went to committee 18 months ago. Well, what is a committee looking at for 18 months? It baffles me that it's taken an 18-month committee stage to get that bill through. So that's frustrating, but that's not the executive. But if another bill coming and if one in front of the committee, which will go to them after tomorrow. So I'm making progress. I'm also able to deliver on policy that otherwise I wouldn't be, and that's where the executive isn't really that involved.
Do you think voters will see that next May?
Yes, I do. I do, because I think by next May the difference is this will all work through the system. So it takes a while to get going, but once it gets going there is a momentum with legislation and delivery. There are things that we're seeing, improvements in, I mentioned earlier about court times and so on. And we've seen a 7% increase in throughput through the Magistrates' Court. We've seen that already from the work we're doing, and that's despite everything else that's going on in the justice system. So yes, I think on balance we're still delivering more than if we were to leave. But if I ever felt, and I've said this very openly, if we got to the point, for example, around budget, where we had parties who want others to carry the weight of making difficult decisions around budget, who want to sit back and wash their hands of it and not agree a 3-year budget, or worse still, not agree a budget at all. I think at that point the executive doesn't really exist in any meaningful form. If you can't set a budget, you can't do government. And I don't think we would want to be a fig leaf that's propping up something that dysfunctional. So we will absolutely participate, and we will, like everybody else, make our case, win some, lose some, provided that on balance we're making progress that we need to make. And we're not going to stand in other people's way either. But if it gets to the point where we feel that other people are being deliberately obstructive and difficult in a way that goes beyond the fact that there are party differences, to the point where we just feel it's starting to become vindictive, then that's where the wheels would come off for us.
Okay. Now, I should probably apologise, because I got you into a bit of trouble a few months ago when I was on
Makes
another...
a change from me getting myself into trouble,
when I was on another podcast for the BBC, I said that the route to a border poll goes through you, right? Okay? He knew you had so much power.
I'm always a lightning rod for everybody's fury with the border. It doesn't matter if it's nationalists or unionists. I'm the lightning rod.
But I'm not going to break that down whether that is the case or not. But obviously we've been looking at polling. We've been looking at recent polls as well, and we were talking about this on a recent episode. I mean, in terms of unionist approval of you, it's not that great.
No.
Okay?
No.
Is that, you maybe think, linked to the Constitution? So Alliance's position on the Constitution has been well rehearsed. You're neutral on the border. You're waiting for a proposition to be put toward you before you guys make a call. Do you think that's hurting you with unionist voters? So you said that in your speech, most people don't go to sleep worried about the border or wake up in a cold sweat over the constitutional question. Tim's done that a few times.
I wake up with a cold sweat over the constitutional question all the time, thinking you might be in charge someday. Put anybody in a cold sweat there?
Go ahead. Is this hurting you?
No, I don't think that's what it is. I think that there has been a really strategic campaign since I took Peter Robinson's seat back in 2010 to demonise me and make me a figure of hate in the unionist loyalist community.
Flag dispute?
There's been the flag stuff, but there's been other things since. And I think that's a strategic decision that was made because I think people saw me as a threat at that point in time within unionism. I come from a working class loyalist community. I've never been behind the door in talking about that. And I think people saw that as an actual threat. And therefore, the easiest way to try and take me down was to demonise me in that community. And unfortunately, once people have got a perception of you, it's very hard to shake. And the weird thing is that I meet people all the time from loyalist backgrounds in the work that I do as Justice Minister, or I meet people from unionist backgrounds about different issues. And one of the most commonly said things to me is, "You're much nicer than I thought you would be." Because I have been so demonised to those people. They have a perception of me that I am the devil incarnate. And they meet me and find that I'm a human being, that I have a sense of humour, that I have compassion for people, that I don't disrespect their beliefs, and I don't see them as in some way a threat. I just think that weaponisation has been really effective in my case. I'm also not a hit with a certain group of unionists. I would say men of a certain age in unionism. I'm not looking at you, Tim. Actually a bit older than you, but men of a certain age, unionist men of a certain age find me a threat and really do not like me. They don't like women with opinions.
Okay.
And they find it hard to manage. They don't want women who will have an argument with them and stand their ground and not defer. They're used to barking orders at people, and when you don't jump, they can't cope. And I do think that I draw particular vitriol from that section of the community. So I don't worry too much about my popularity, because, to be honest, I didn't get involved in politics to be popular or populist, for that matter. It's not who I am, and it's not for me a popularity contest. It's about substance, and so I just keep going with the substance, keep reaching out to people, keep doing what I need to do, and ultimately, if people don't like me, there isn't anything I can do about that. Nor is it something that I'm going to lose sleep over, because there's lots of people in this life who won't like you. So you listen to the people who actually you're close to and you care about.
Yeah, but there's an inevitability. For years, Naomi, you were probably the most popular personality in Northern Ireland politics, and it can't last forever for anyone.
But I don't know that I'm not sure about that, actually.
You carried in through the European election, really popular. I mean, you were probably more popular than the party.
But not with the same group of people who are now saying that they don't like me. They didn't like me then either, because a lot of these people would have been Brexiteers, and I was anti-Brexit. There are unionists who do like me. There are people who are pro-union in this party who support me as leader. There are people in the unionist community who, if there was a border poll tomorrow, would vote for the union, who like me and vote for me. I think the issue is whether or not they would vote for the unionist parties anymore. Whether they would, if they were asked to fill in a piece of paper, are you a unionist, whether that's how they would identify themselves. It's not that they're anti-union, but they don't necessarily associate themselves with what they see unionism presented as, politically and sometimes culturally. I think those are the people who probably find me hard work. And that's okay, because that is not the space that I'm in. I also draw I draw quite a lot of vitriol and a fair wee bit of threat from kind of dissident Republican circles and others who don't like my views on the rule of law and, all of that sort of stuff. I think Sinn Féin voters and the Sinn Féin machine is smarter, and that they know that if they want to bring people towards a united Ireland, the way to do it isn't to behave in an aggressive, nasty, demeaning manner. Unionism hasn't really learned to be charming yet. And you're right, we know unionists are going to vote for the union in a poll. We know nationalists will vote for United Ireland, broadly speaking, because it's an ideological position. People don't know where Alliance voters might go, but nothing that unionism says or does to Alliance elected representatives in the public space would entice Alliance voters to be warm in that regard.
I know no one's interested, but Ireland won.
Brilliant, there we go. So you're not going to join us in the pan-nationalist front just yet, no?
No, and
what can we do? Can we get you over?
No. Well, there are things you could do, but it wouldn't get me over. There are just things you should do. Like I'm my position, David. I believe that if you really want to advocate for a united Ireland, you need a proposition. I mean, all of this, the green-lit uplands that we heard about in Brexit, we don't need another round of that nonsense in a border poll. We don't want to take another leap in the dark where everybody thinks that it's going to be something different and everybody ends up disappointed. So that's exactly, everybody's Brexit was different. Everybody's Brexit was imagined in their head because there was no firm proposition that people were voting for. And as a result, the people who voted for it were angry, the people who voted against it are angry. We don't need that in a border poll. So if people are serious about wanting a united Ireland, they need to come up with a robust proposition that can be tested and challenged. And I think that's important. Won't necessarily win us over, but it'll give us something at least to chew over and talk about. Equally, I think unionism needs to stop attacking people who don't agree with them and start actually setting out why they should agree with them. Actually make a proposition for the United Kingdom that goes beyond flags and marches and bonfires. Because, to be honest, those are marginal issues in most communities, and they're not the thing that drive people's kind of long-term views and vision. So for me, I feel that there are things that can be done. I just think that people in Alliance will make their own decision. It's how it's always been. They'll come to their own conclusions, and we're not driving the conversation. I'm interested, like, at the minute, I kind of feel like we're the pass the parcel kind of. Nobody actually wants us. Everybody has to pretend they want us, but nobody actually wants us. I want to turn Northern Ireland into the kind of place that when you talk to people in Dublin and London, they actually want us to be part of what they are. Not, it's like, oh yeah, we'll say it because we have to, that we want a united Ireland, but oh, what, God help us if it actually happened. I still don't think there's that. I just don't think we're there yet. And I also don't think if you were to rub the border away tomorrow, that Northern Ireland would be any more functional than it is right now. We are a dysfunctional, divided society, and I think we need to deal with that as a community. Can't deal with it in isolation. Yeah. I think the UK government, the Irish government and society in these islands has a role to play, but I do think we need to deal with those problems and make life better for people.
Taking us very nicely, because I know Tim on civility and politics.
Well, no, actually, I wanted to congratulate you on something, Naomi. I think it's something you've done in the past week. What's nobody, I think, has done in politics, certainly in the last 30 years, maybe ever. I mean, I don't know that you really understand the achievement that you have reached this week. You have managed to unite the Ulster Unionist MLA group. Because your comments on civility and politics, I was tweets coming out of everywhere from every one of them, united against you. You've united them all in one thing. This is an amazing achievement.
I did say men of a certain age are used to barking orders.
Well, see, John Burrows has said in your comments in the Belfast Telegraph on civility, he has said, I believe in rigorous scrutiny, not personal abuse. However, it's often alliance who engage in the personal stuff. Then he goes on to say something about Diana Armstrong being referred to as his little sister.
No,
what do you say to John?
Well, a couple of things. What actually happened was David Honeyford referred to the Ulster Unionist Party as the DUP's little sister, and it just so happened Diana Armstrong was the only person in the room when it was said. So it was misconstrued, and David apologised, because that's not the kind of politics we do. Look, I wouldn't really say very much to John, if I'm honest, because it's clear that everybody was acting because they were told to do it. Bottom line, if you read what I actually said, not once did I mention the Ulster Unionist Party when I spoke about civility and politics. To be quite honest, I wasn't even thinking of them when I said it. And the fact that they have reacted so viscerally to it says more about how they perceive their own behaviour than anything that I said. They know how they are behaving. They know what they're doing. Nobody else took offence. I didn't see Gavin running to a mic going, how dare she suggest we're bullies. I didn't name anybody. I just don't think we are seeing our best selves in politics. I said earlier in the week that I feel like the Assembly Chamber has become like some kind of toxic Thunderdome. And it's exaggerated language, but there is some truth in it. I talk to MLAs who dread going and sitting in the chamber. Not because they're shrinking violets, not because they're afraid to make their case, they're absolutely not. But they're saying, I don't know if I can just sit there and listen to the bile and the abuse and the nastiness and the unpleasantness.
How do you change it?
Well, first of all, you do have to change it by what you do. And look, I'm as robust as anybody in a debate. I'll give as good as I get. I mean, I remember calling Jim Allister a one-seat wonder in the middle of a debate. So I'm not going to say that I'm not capable of doing the odd bit of like knockabout myself. And there's a certain degree of it that is okay if there's humour in it and it's not intentionally being unpleasant. Some of the stuff crosses a line. I really genuinely feel some of the stuff crosses a line. And I think that the tenor of the debate generally has declined, particularly in this mandate. It feels like everybody actually comes to the chamber to try and get a clip for TikTok rather than to make a point or engage. The purpose of debate isn't to read out something you've written or someone has written for you. It is to make your case and then listen to somebody with a different perspective, hear what it is they're saying, and try to understand if there's anything you can do to meet in the middle to try and resolve the issue. That's the purpose of debate. You can't do that if everybody is just trying to lob zingers at each other across the chamber so they'll get a wee clickbait Twitter thing or whatever. And we're talking past each other, and we need to start talking with each other. And I just think, as I say, look, I was in City Hall for a long time. It could be knockabout, and some of the people that I did the knockabout with, I mean, I remember Christopher Stalford, who was a good friend of mine. When I was Lord Mayor, and the first night I was in the chair, I turned his microphone off. because he was playing up.
We all wish we could have turned Christopher's microphone.
And I turned his microphone off, and I remember him saying to me when he became Deputy Speaker, my revenge will be sweet. It's been long waited for, but it will be sweet. But we could be friends and still have that exchange. It has gotten nastier now. You know, it's the sniping in the corridor. It's the kind of just general unpleasantness.
So are you saying it's spilling out of the chamber and into the corridors
It
now?
is, not everywhere, but it is in places. It's the stuff that happens that is unseen, that's uncomfortable. And I do think it's got nastier. And like as I say, I'm not somebody who, you know, because as soon as I say this, everybody's like, oh, what a snowflake. But I'm not a snowflake. Like, I have gone through some pretty dire political experiences. And I've never balked at taking on the opposition and arguing my case, whether it's just one of me or like 100 of us. It's not who I am, but I do find the tone of debate. And I don't think, like, I remember having this to and fro with Edwin. I'm not calling it an argument because he's the Speaker and you're not allowed to argue. But I had a to and fro with Edwin. And, you know, he kind of said, oh, you know, you have a lot of parliamentary experience, you're more than able for it. The point is you shouldn't have to be to get your voice heard. You shouldn't have to be able to take a hammering in the chamber to get heard. You should be able to go in and be professional, put your point across, articulate what it is you have to say, and be listened to respectfully. And despite our differences, and there are things about Edwin that I like and things that I don't, but I think he reads this wrong. He enjoys the knockabout. And I think much of what happens, a bit like, you know, a bit like Caesar in, with the gladiators. He's sitting at the front watching this pugilistic fight in the chamber, and he loves that, right?
Yeah.
And the public,
Paul Given as well.
But I think the public hate it. I actually think the public hate it because they see it as unprofessional. I remember John Bercow, when he was Speaker in the House of Commons, saying about question time, and people are like, oh, it's political theatre. And he said, yeah, but it's not, it's pantomime. And the public see it as unprofessional because if they acted like that in work, in the middle of work when people are saying things they don't like, they'd be out on their ear.
But also it is terrible when people come into the chamber with a pre-prepared speech, which is almost identical to the one that's been read 3 or 4 times before, and they read it out without any self-awareness. They're going, didn't you just hear your man read it out?
Worse.
And that's worse.
Well, it's as bad.
Well, as bad, okay.
I mean, Guy, have been in a situation where a really nice MLA actually asked me a question. It was about a police station in their constituency, and I said, management of the police estate isn't a matter for the Department of Justice. You'd be better to ask your question from the PSNI. And when I sat down, they then got up and read their pre-prepared supplementary. Further to that, thank you for your answer, but further to that, and asked another question about the same thing. And at that stage, it's really hard not to sound like you're being rude by going, did you hear what I just said? Like, I can't answer this. And that's tough. I've had other examples, though, which have been totally different. So I'll give you an example. Actually, somebody in the DUP got up and asked me a question about McGilligan. And said what was I going to do anything at McGilligan, and I set out the plan. When they called them for a supplementary, went, no, I've heard all I need to. And I thought, that's somebody who's got their article for the local newspaper and they don't need any more information. But there was a self-awareness. He wasn't just going to get up and ask a question again because he could. He had got the information he needed, and that was it done.
But I just don't know. For me, and we watch Stormont because we have to, you're in Stormont because you're elected there, but it's just the standard of debate for a long time now has been so poor. Like I just don't know, how do we raise that? How do we raise the bar?
Well, you don't raise it by having people coming in the way that they have, as I say, just knocking abuse across the chamber, because that doesn't raise the standard of debate. Because what I would argue is that a lot of quite skilled debaters don't want to be in the chamber because they just see it as a waste of their time and their energy because it's all just about performance. I think what you need to do is stick to the standards. There are things you're not allowed to say in Parliament. I mean, I've heard people being called hypocrites in the chamber. If you did that in Parliament, you'd be out in your ear. So there's got to be rules. There's got to be a certain level of respect. The whole purpose of Parliament, and I used to think the whole honourable member thing was a bit of a joke, particularly at times when the members weren't honourable and you knew that. But, you know, there is something about saying, look, I'm not disparaging you as a person because we take a different political view. I recognise you're an honourable person and you're here for the right reasons, but I'm going to hold you to account for what you're saying. And there are certain rules around that and a civility around that that doesn't make it exciting. I mean, I'll tell you, I had a chat with Diane Dodds when I was in the European Parliament. I'm not going to suggest for a minute Diane loved the European Parliament because she'd shoot me if I said that. But what she did say to me was that she found it quite shocking when she went back to Stormont, the incivility. Because in the European Parliament, it's a parliament built on consensus about bringing people together. People would negotiate before they got to the chamber, and it was all very civilised. And Diane, to be fair to her, is always very polite and very civilised in her engagement. But she said she was shocked at how rude people were. Now, there's a bit of bluntness, I think, that comes with all of us in Northern Ireland. Like, we call a spade a shovel and get on with it, and it's just how we are. But you can disagree respectfully.
Do you think we miss a bar? Because in Westminster, you've got the Stranger's Bar everybody goes to. Holyrood's the same. And Stormont's stuck away in the middle of nowhere. And the bar's dead in Stormont. Do you think from your time in Westminster, you see the deals, because we've all been in the Stranger's Bar, you see the deals being done there. People you're shocked at being friends there. Maybe that's what we need.
I don't
a lock-in.
Oh God.
Well, you're all getting paid more money.
I hope they don't lock me in.
Well, you could be behind pulling the pints of Guinness for everybody.
I genuinely don't think what we need is a bar, but I do think that there is a lack of a social engagement in Stormont, and we would see that. If you actually look at what goes on in the all-party groups, for example, it's much better. Yep. Generally, there's a lot of consensus. Same is true to some degree, less this time than last time, around committees. But it's in the chamber. It's like naughty children showing off for other people to go, oh, look at you, aren't you being cheeky? And it just feels to me like it's not professional. And at some level, I also think that the disparity in how even the speakers impose the rules is so dramatically different depending on who's in the chair. It becomes really confusing, actually. So I think consistency, keeping the standards high, and we do, of course, have a nicely refurbished downstairs kitchen there where we can go and eat lunch together and could if we wanted to.
Everybody sits on their own tables, but I'm sure they still sit DUP at the back or UUP's there. Alliance is here, Sinn Féin near the cash register.
They used to do that. And I remember in the members, there was like a members' tea room in Westminster, which I was only in once. And I remember, I think it was Margaret Ritchie went in. She wasn't an MP for very long, and she sat down at an empty table and was told to move because it was a Conservative table. Unbelievable nonsense. So that happens everywhere, I guess, a little bit. But I do think I just think that our politics can be very hard-edged. Look, there are lots of people in politics I disagree with fundamentally in terms of their approach and their views and their vision for the future of this place. But I do think that the majority, not all, but the majority of them are there because they actually want to make things better for the people they represent. The way they go about it might be different than the way I would go about it. The people they represent may have different aspirations than the people I represent. But I don't necessarily think that they go out to work every morning with a few exceptions going, who can I really aggravate today? And there are exceptions. I'm not going to name them because we all know who they are.
Well, are all these rude MLAs worth $14,000 a year? Extra?
No.
I'll name them. One's called Tim, one's called Jonathan.
In all honesty, I don't think that well, there's a couple of things. So I don't think MLAs should set their own pay. I just think as a principle that it's the right principle. But I don't think that the independent review of salaries has done politics and the respect for politics in Northern Ireland any favours with the public in doing what they've done. It's right to say benchmarking against other institutions makes sense, but other institutions aren't there for only 5 out of the 10 years of the last 10 years. So you can't really benchmark Stormont against that. And do I think our MLAs work hard? They do. I see it. I know how hard people work. But I know how hard people work in the prison service and the police service. And they got like a 4.6% uplift last year. Others were getting 5%. And we actually argued in our submission that they should tag us to other public sector workers, because ultimately, if you're in politics for the right reason, it is public sector service. That's what we're there for. We're there to make people's lives better. We're there to try and build up our public sector. And at a time when I don't know how I'm going to balance my budget next year, it just feels wrong to be changing the gears so massively. You can say, well, there's been nothing done for 10 years. Well, yeah, and whose fault is that? For the last 10 years, for 5 of them, we haven't been there. So it's our own fault that there's this 10-year lag, and I don't think we should be rewarded for it. But also, there's something fundamentally wrong with the fact that when they went off to do pay review, one of the things they came back with was how they will handle the next collapse of the institutions. They are actually now making decisions predicated on the fact that the institutions will topple. Like, what is wrong with our government that they can't see between that and Lady Hallett's COVID inquiry? This is not sustainable. We're going to have to make changes to the institutions that make them stable. The issue isn't here, let's punish the MLA's salaries. Let's be honest, if you pull it down and you decide to go on strike, you should get no salary. If you're willing to go to work, and willing to do your job, you should be able to go to work and do your job. That's how it works in every other industry, and it's how it should work in politics.
Okay. Well, look, we could cover loads more with you, but thank you.
We could do another hour.
We could do another hour, but people want to get to a pub, so thank you so much.
David wants to get
I
to
want
a
to get to a
pub.
pub, yeah. People being me. Look, thank you for joining us on our first ever live edition at Stormont Sources. So thanks very much to the Alliance Party for having us along. Thank you to my regular co-host. Thanks to Tim. Thanks to Michael. Thank you to the Alliance Party leader, Naomi Long. Remember, if you want to get in touch with anything you're hearing, 0333 404 6507. Remember to use the word Stormont. You can also drop us an email, hello@stormontsources.com. That's all we have time for this episode and for this conference. We'll see you again next week. Thank you all for coming. Next week.